Hello, this is Dr. Deb Watry. Welcome to Week 5, a review for TED 750. So as we take a look at Week 5, we have some important things happening. You're going to be writing your last chapter, Chapter 3 Methodology. We have a discussion going, but more importantly, I'm going to talk about this first, your IRB application, which is due October 1st. So Chapter 3 resources, remember back in Week 3, I put in additional resources for Chapter 2 and 3. And Chapter 3 talks about different types of methods, all three types. How do you choose between quantitative and qualitative? Both types are researched if you are doing a mixed methods and a review of mixed methods. This is additional resources for you along with our BUI text. Please do pay attention to the readings for this week. You have Chapter 7 in the BUI text, which talks about writing Chapter 3 and the layout. There's some very important articles. The Belly article talks about quantitative research, and that's this article. And also Chapter 4 talks about quantitative research. And then the John Creswell article talks about different qualitative approaches, because you need to select an approach and then give a rationale of why you're using that approach. And again, the BUI text Chapter 4 and the Yilmaz article compares both types, okay, and kind of lays some groundwork with you. And then I also put in a few additional materials which might be helpful in developing your Chapter 3. So let's talk about that IRB exempt status form first. This is the form. It's in there several times. You do not have to do a full IRB. To do that full IRB would be somebody who might be doing a doctorate dissertation or more intense type of research. This gets submitted to me. There's a drop box in this section right here where you submit it to me. I check it over, make sure everything's been filled out and explained enough, and I submit that with your IRB certification to the IRB committee. Now they will meet the second week of October, and that's why we have to get our IRBs sent into them. They want them ahead of time, and then they meet as a committee and tell you the results. So that's why we're looking at this October 1st, and again, this is the form, this is the form, due October 1st. So a little bit about that Declaration of Exempt Status. Some things you want to make sure you don't forget anything. Your information. Okay, and you are a graduate student. My information. When do you anticipate to start? When do you anticipate to end your study? And then the title of your study. There's a section where they ask you to do a project summary. Okay, and this is describing how your project will be conducted. So you talk about some of the things that you're going to be doing and how you're going to approach this. So this is a guide for you about what maybe would be best to go in that. One paragraph with the background of your study, why you're doing it. A paragraph on the data collection instruments. If you're doing a survey, a checklist, you should have more than one type of data collection instrument. And a paragraph about how you will collect and protect that data and why you think your study is exempt. So in the weeks for this week, there is a student example. Do take a look at that. You want to make sure that you are talking about creating a minimal risk for your students, that they won't be harmed or there won't be discomfort in doing this study, that is part of their normal daily routine, something that will be not an additional work for them to do. So a lot of you are doing an examination of educational instructional strategies, something that you would normally be doing in the classroom. So you want to make sure that you emphasize that this is a normal practice, that this is a practice your school is implementing, or a practice that you are investigating to make your own instruction better. So you want to make sure that you describe that this is going to be happening in your own classroom or in your own school community, that it's not an unnatural setting. Those of you not in a school setting, you still would want to say that the study is taking place in that parameters of that business organization. Now, this is something that they look careful for, that it's part of a normal education practice. So if you're doing a survey, you would want to make sure that you would mention something about doing surveys throughout the school year, that students do surveys as a normal practice in finding out how they're doing on assignments, what they're feeling about certain things, and how you're taking a look at how they're doing before and after. So I know a lot of you do this in the normal classroom routine, and you want to make sure that you emphasize that. Now, there also is a question that talks about explaining your consent process. If you go to the UW Superior IRB committee, there's a whole section on informed consent guidelines, and there are about 12 elements that you'd want to take a look at. You don't have to address them all, but you want to talk about how you're going about to get the parental consent. Now, for those of you that are dealing with adults, you have a different type of consent, but you still do have to get consent for them to participate in your research study. One of the things they ask you to fill out is this little questionnaire: will your research involve any of these? Okay, so if you answer yes, if you answered no, because you're not dealing with students or children, you wouldn't have to fill out the next question here. So some things you'll talk about, the informed consent. You're going to develop some qualities that you're going to have in there, and this would be an example that you are going to make sure that for informed consent you'll avoid that. And you have to initial, okay, that you affirm to these 4 statements, okay? And again, this is due October 1st. And once you get your initials in there, your form, make sure you save it as a document and send it to me. You don't do any more, because this is what the IRB committee fills in the rest of that form. So I want to move on to Chapter 3. This is an error right here. Chapter 3 should be written out, not a Roman numeral, but write out the whole word. But this is an important chapter where you lay out your research method. You talk about your participants. What are you going to do to collect your data? If you're doing a mixed method or quantitative, you have to define the variables of your study. You write about how you're going to collect your data and analyze it. Even though you haven't done it yet, you're going to still write that this is what you did, okay? You collected this data, and you did this, and you analyzed it using this process, and then a summary paragraph. So I'm trying to get this organized for you. Again, please past tense. I've gone over it like 3 times now. This is not present tense. You don't say the researcher will or this study will. You would say the study found, the study researched, okay? So I'll briefly introduce the topic. And I can't emphasize this enough. Something similar like this goes into Chapter 3, Chapter 4, Chapter 5. Rework it a little bit so it's not redundant in the same words, but you always have to reintroduce the topic, tell the problem, your purpose statement again, and your research questions. And the reason you do this is because your study could be separated out in chapters, and some of you could just be reading your Chapter 3 and then not know the background of your study. So you do this in the beginning of every Chapter 3, 4, and 5. Do not put introduction up here. Just go right into these paragraphs. The next subheading is your research methodology and design. And this section is about 3 paragraphs here. So you're going to describe in detail, and this is the thing here, don't be too brief, the methodology and corresponding design that you selected. And you have to defend why this approach was the best procedure. And a lot of students, I send this back and I say, you haven't done this. And this is why the readings for the week are so important. If I'm doing qualitative, I'm going to focus on the Creswell article and be able to pull something out from there to defend and say Creswell stated, so that I can back up why I used the qualitative approach. So do pay attention to the elements that you have to have in this section. Okay, this is just an example of person that took the quantitative approach, so the Belly article was good for the quantitative approach, and this was just one of those paragraphs. Okay, you need to have some background and weight to why you're doing this study in this type of approach. So do pull out a quote or a summary or something that gives your own research recognition, and that you have aligned it to somebody who has written extensively about your type of research. The next section are who's in your study. Some of you will have more than one group. Some of you doing a few students from your classroom. Some of you are doing some students and teachers. Some are just doing adults. Okay, so you want to describe the overall population, how you obtain that sample, why it could represent a larger population, and the sampling process. This would be that you selected the whole class, or that you used, you sent out parent permission slips and the 10 people that responded became your sample. Okay, but you do need to defend that it's an ample amount to cover your study. The instrumentation is about 1 to 2 paragraphs. Describe the materials and instruments used to collect your data and their accuracy to assess what was intended. So a lot of you want to use a survey, and you can use surveys that would have a Likert scale of 1 to 5, and you want to explain why you selected that. You might have a mixed survey where you have at the end or the beginning open-ended questions, so that not only are you doing a rating, but you're asking some students or teachers some feedback that would show that it's a mixed study. So talk about why you're using the type of instrument that you're using. If you're using a checklist, if you're using test results, you want to make sure that you talk about each one. Again, if you're doing the mixed study or the quantitative, you will have variables. This is described in the BUI text. So you want to make sure that you do define them if necessary. Probably the biggest part of this chapter 3 is about 4 paragraphs. Okay, and here's where you describe then your data collection and your analysis procedures. So you want to describe that in detail. Okay, and that is about 4 paragraphs long. And then your summary paragraph. Okay, take your time with your summary. Don't be too brief. You covered a lot of information. So you'd want to talk again about your study, the purpose of it, the type of study you're doing, who your participants are, and how you're going to get the data. So it's something that you're telling them again. Think of any writing assignment. The introduction, you tell them what you're going to do, where you talk about the problems and the research question. You tell them, and in that summary, you tell them what you told them. But it's done in a truncated version here. Always. Again, I put this in a lot of your drafts. That last sentence of chapter 3 will be a lead-in to chapter 4. So again, your data collection analysis, that was that 4 paragraph before your summary. Talk about your materials, the measurement instruments. How did you secure validity and reliability? The data procedure, your data analysis. How did you keep that data secure? Very important. Did you keep it locked away? Look at the student examples that are in our text, and that would be very helpful for you in how to format that. So some pointers before beginning the data collection process. You want to make sure that you have this type of wording, that any research that you do cannot be started until you get the IRB approval. Okay, so you might be all set to go and you want to do your student survey and you're going to send out your parent consent letter. That can't happen till you get the IRB approval. Okay, it cannot happen until the IRB approves your study. So this IRB approval, they'll send you a letter, becomes part of your research. It's usually the first appendix that you have in your research, so it probably would be Appendix A. Okay, but you do have to have this in your data collection section. This is where a paragraph as such would go, where you talk about how you were given approval. Okay. And I've already talked about this. These are just 2 samples of the summary, the last sentence of that summary paragraph. Lead your reader into the next chapter so they know that at the end of chapter 3, that's not it, that there's more to come. Okay, so if they just had your chapter 3, they're going to say, I need to go out and find the rest of this study. So very important, that last sentence. Some reminders now, if you don't have a title page, create that title page. Start lining up that table of contents appropriately. Page numbering, upper right corner. Okay, upper right corner. References, you should pretty much have given you feedback. You should be pretty solid on putting those references. Anything else that you add now gets put in your reference page. Headers, they are all left margin. Some of you are putting in the middle of the page. They are all left margin. Remember, in the first week, there's a lot of APA resources for you, and I've sent a number of you, I said, look at the APA resources. Okay, so here's that reference list. Here's how to do headers and page numbering. This will be for chapter 4 and 5, how to do tables and figures. What's coming up? Next week you'll be your writing should be done. I'll be reading your chapter 3 so that I can get feedback for you and you can start working on that revision of chapters 1, 2, and 3. But start developing your parent consent letter. And then there's some reading in the chapters and articles on ethical stance and validity, why that is important. So that's week 6 coming up. I need to congratulate you. Once you get through this week, the large part of your master thesis is finished. The introduction, the literature review, and then this week is your methodology. And that is basically the TED 750 course. So when you get to this part and get that finished and submitted, I think it should be a great sense of accomplishment. I'm very proud of the work that you're doing. And again, I will give you feedback, as I've done previously. I want to make sure that your thesis is sound and well developed and well presented. Please let me know if you have questions. Send me an email and we'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. So good luck with this week. I'm looking forward to working with you and reading your methodology chapters.